All right, today we have another episode from the archives with one of my incredible guests. Enjoy. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Kerry Heckman. Kerry, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
All right. So Kerry is a freelance writer and clinical social worker in private practice in Seattle. After 10 years as a high school social worker in the Chicago area, she followed her intuition to the Pacific Northwest in 2018. There, she was introduced to a therapeutic modality called Somatic Transformation, created by Dr. Sharon Stanley, one of my favorites. She's been on the podcast. This life-changing lens through which to understand trauma and the nervous system taught her how to manage her own complex health issues, as well as help clients who've experienced trauma. Kerry is now inspired to bring this information to as many people as possible to work towards a more embodied world. All right, awesome. Welcome once again. So before we get going here, Kerry, so give our listeners a little background. So you're in Seattle now. You're in Chicago. Where were you born? Where are you from originally?
I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay.
Lived there until I was 18 when I moved to Illinois for college. Actually went to study musical theater, and then in a twist of events, changed my major to human services, which is kind of the precursor for going to grad school for social work.
Okay. You might know that I'm currently in Bend. We just moved to Bend, Oregon, like 4 months ago.
We're close.
Yeah. So, all right, let's dive in here. So how did things unfold for you such that you got into this field?
Right. So I think the initial inciting incident, if I can rewind all the way back to how I got into the field of social work, when I decided to change my major away from theater and move into social work, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. It was kind of that moment where I was a little lost and needed some guidance, and ended up having this synchronistic conversation with somebody going into counseling. And then realizing that I had, really my entire young life been so fascinated by people and kind of what makes them who they are. And so it seemed like a good fit. And then I started studying and really found that it was exactly the right fit, that everything I was learning was resonating, and I, kind of couldn't wait to learn more. And so eventually, went to graduate school for social work, and education's really important in my family. So my mom was an elementary school teacher. So thought maybe school social work would be the right fit for me. And it was for a long time until it started to get really intense, and kind of coincidingly, I started to get sick. And so, I eventually decided that I just wasn't able to maintain that level of intensity at work with my illness, which at that point was still mostly undiagnosed. Eventually came to be diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, and left that job and worked part-time at a university, and really kind of thought, okay, what's the next step? What can I do that I can also work and maintain my health? And that summer, my husband and I went on a cruise to Alaska, and I had never felt better in my life. The fresh air and the evergreen trees and the mountains. And it was then I was like, okay, we need to be in this. And Alaska wasn't quite realistic. So Seattle felt like a better fit. And when I came here, decided that it was time to start my private practice. But I really, I was very much new and needed some guidance. So wanted to join a group practice. And one of the group practices I was looking into requested a somatic therapist. And I had never heard of this. I didn't know what this was, and started researching, and just everything that I was learning made complete sense for my life experience, as well as what I was noticing in people that I'd worked with. And just by chance decided to go to a retreat put on by Dr. Sharon Stanley. And yeah, everything has been somatic therapy since that point.
Wow. So again, for those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Sharon Stanley, she is a somatic therapist, really specializing in trauma. But man, you've got to go back and listen to the interviews I've done with her. I've had her on as a guest to Trauma Therapist 2.0, my membership community. And really, Kerry, when we were kind of emailing back and forth and you mentioned her, I was like, all right, she's got to come on the podcast. I can't say enough about her. But first of all, you said that position was getting kind of intense, and coincidentally or not, you were getting sick. Talk a little bit more about that. Was that intensity? What was that intensity, I guess?
Right. I think, and in the Pacific Northwest, it's not as common to have high school social workers working within the schools. But in other parts of the country, schools will have a social worker on staff, and usually it's, the ratio between the number of students and the number of social workers is, very unrealistic and not recommended. And so I was the one person in a school of 900.
Right.
Yeah, kind of being the main person people go to when things are hard, or there's a child who needs someone to hold space for them and help them through difficulty. So yeah, it was a little overwhelming to have that number of kind of people in my care.
Right. So, you talked about finding these workshop or events, and things just clicked for you. Now, there's a couple things that I think that are really important in that I kind of want to unpack if we could. One is the fact that you said things clicked for you. And when there's, people and the listeners know there's so many modalities out there. What do I work on? What do I choose? What should I pursue? Talk a little bit about how and why that clicked for you.
Right. So I had been learning about the chronic stress response and how that works for people who have illness, because Lyme disease, often it triggers autoimmune disease. So often people with Lyme disease have many different autoimmune diseases. And that's basically a 24/7 chronic stress response in the body. So I knew about that, but I didn't know how that related to trauma, and how, similar to illness, trauma can dysregulate the nervous system and cause people to be in a chronic stress response. And everything made sense from there on out. And somatic transformation specifically, which is what Sharon created, is this relational approach to that. So it's really about the relationship between the therapist and the client, and how healing that is. And that had been my, modality or therapeutic lean ever since I started working in social work, was that it was about the relationship. And so that really made so much sense to me. And then this idea of co-regulation, right? Like we regulate with another before we can regulate on our own. And it's just all of those things together really clicked, like I said, and started to feel like, okay, this is what I need to be doing. And I guess the body element of it as well, and the body-based therapy because it's, when you're a young therapist, the idea of re-traumatization is so scary. You don't want to do anything that will harm somebody that you care about and you want to help. And so the idea that you can work with the body and not have to retell a story that is traumatic and would bring up a traumatic stress response was comforting for me as the therapist, but also knowing that that can be effective, that it's not, you're not avoiding anything, you're leaning into the nervous system's ability to process and heal through the body.
You mentioned early on, you kind of understood the importance of the relationship. I didn't. I mean, I kind of knew that was there and I knew it was a thing, but I didn't really get it, quite honestly, until, I started doing this podcast and I learned more. Talk about that for you. Like, how did you get, because a lot of people don't, I think a lot of people do understand it, but they don't get how vital it is, if not the most important thing. Talk about that from your perspective in your world. How did that make sense to you?
The reason it makes sense to me is that trauma happens in relationship. And so if we are hoping to heal, that also needs to happen in relationship. And a person needs to know that someone cares and someone sees them, and that in itself is the most healing element, is that we are relational. Everything we do is in relationship. And if all you have is traumatic memories of relationships, you need to know that relationships can be good and connected and real and authentic. And I think that as long as you genuinely care about the person that you're working with, that they will feel that somatically. Whether or not they cognitively even realize it, they will feel it somatically. And that is where people start to lay down some of those defenses. How
did the trauma element come in for you? Talk about that.
Yeah. So I think as at least kind of in my life experience, and I don't know why that was the reason, but the idea of trauma was always, war, car accidents, things that we all fear and dread. And if one of those things wasn't present, that trauma wasn't present. And then when I decided to go into private practice, I thought, okay, as much trauma as I worked with, this is a gap for me. I need some strategies to work with people who have trauma. And that's why I signed up to go see Sharon and learn about it. And then it was, everyone has trauma. We all have trauma that lives in our body. And then, it was like, okay. And the other thing that really clicked for me was this, this concept of people who have a lot of self-hatred or a lot of self-loathing, and they work to get help. And it's kind of that feeling that just doesn't go away. And when I learned that feeling was connected to trauma, it was like, okay, that's my work. Like, that is where I want to be, because of how difficult that feeling is of this kind of being an outsider, not belonging, not being good enough, not having worth. And how that there is a part of that in all of us too. But for the people where that's a really big part, that's who I wanted to work with. And when I learned about how that was connected to trauma, it was just, okay, here's where I need to be. This is the work that I need to be doing.
All right. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram or not, but when I do interviews, I usually do 2 interviews a week. I conduct 2 interviews a week. And usually I get so excited. I get so pumped up after these interviews because I get to talk to incredible people. And what I usually do is I go on Instagram and I talk about it. I want to share that excitement. Usually there's about a 2-month turnaround on my podcast, which means that they don't go live for a couple of months. And I have a problem with that because I want to share it. I get so excited about these things. So what I've done is I've created a membership called Trauma Therapist Plus, and it allows people for $5 a month to access these episodes about 2 months before they get published to the public. And you can also listen ad-free, which is really cool. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in listening to episodes before they get released to the general public and also listening ad-free, check it out. You can access it by going to Apple Podcasts and just clicking on any of the episodes that has a plus, Plus, before it. It's exciting. I'm excited about it. And you'll also help support the podcast. Thank you so much for being a listener. I really appreciate it. Take care. Wow. I mean, to hear you say that is exciting to me because I think whenever we are able and fortunate enough to have that feeling and that sensation, I think it's an awesome feeling because like, it lights us up. It's like, okay, that makes sense to me. So what does that look like to you in session? And I realize this is a crazy question and it's different for everybody, but can you break it down? What does that mean? Like when you're in relationship with someone and trying to create that environment, what does it look like?
Yeah. So I kind of have these signposts that I hold in my mind. And they kind of guide me to remember that really this is about helping someone feel seen. But seen on the body, the level of the body and the level of the trauma that is sometimes not even understood. So there's the signpost, right, of curiosity, like this person is their own expert on themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I really try to turn off that analytical, academic side and really work on the curiosity of, okay, if this person is the expert in who they are, and I really want to know them, then I need to maintain my curiosity throughout this session. And, you know, our left brain really good at pulling us into that analytical academic place. So just constantly reminding myself to be curious about the person and that I really do want to know what that feeling is like for them and what their life experience has been like for them. And then, so that, you know, there's the curiosity and then there really is that genuine, authentic attunement, you know, which is a word Sharon uses a lot, is we are really attuning to the person. So what are those little clues that I'm receiving that maybe this person doesn't feel seen, right? Are they, you know, did something shift in their body where they, you know, dropped down, or is, did they sigh, or, you know, what are the clues that I can get that this person isn't feeling seen in that moment, and how can I do better to resonate and attune to how this person is feeling? How can I ask the right questions about their experience to elicit that understanding so that they can feel that?
I mean, it's listening to you talk. First of all, this is amazing. This is what I love doing. Why I love doing this podcast. It sounds challenging. It sounds real. I mean, you talked about not, you know, kind of letting the academic go. Of course, that doesn't mean letting everything you know go or the knowledge go, but to get to that space that you're talking about, where you're able to have that awareness about what's going on with the person in front of you and your own self, Was that process of getting there, was that a challenge for you? Talk about a little bit about how you got to that space where you were able to do that.
Right. I think a lot of it is having your own somatic therapist. That's a huge part of it, because I needed to co-regulate with another person to learn the resources of my body in order to maintain grounding and maintaining embodiment, because so much is intuition, right? It's so much about what is just coming up. What is just that image that flashes into my mind? What is that word that's coming up? What is that question that's coming up? And in order to do that, we need to be embodied. So we need to go through the process of unpacking our life experiences, which, I can tell you I have many that I needed and need to continue to work through in that way. And so it's not a perfect Zen-like embodiment, right? It's this constant checking in and, am I starting to get away from myself? Okay, I need to come back into the body. And I think it's the most challenging thing that anyone can do ever. And it's what we're calling on our clients to do. It's what we're calling on ourselves to do. And it is the most challenging thing we will ever do.
It sounds like there's, one has to have, you talked about intuition, like self-trust, trusting your own sensations and feelings and emotions, and at the same time being able to modulate what's coming out of your mouth in a sense. It sounds very challenging, but so, I love hearing you talk about this process of really seeing someone on a somatic level too, and what that means.
Yeah, it's, the reason why, and maybe this is something where I still have a lot of learning to do about what is that? What is happening when we are seeing someone on a somatic level that allows us to maybe release trauma or allows us to let down a defense that we've been holding on to for our entire lifetime sometimes. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's pretty magical and it's pretty amazing that we're able to do it. Yeah.
Let's talk about kind of an early clinical error. Your one clinical error.
There was just one.
And what you learned from that? What would you share?
Yeah, so I did kind of try to mine the experiences I've had to come up with kind of that one thing. But if I could broaden it a little bit, I do think it falls into really, I think every early clinician needs a therapist and needs a consulting therapist. And that's the self-care that I wasn't giving myself that I need to give myself now. But I do think it's this idea that I think young clinicians really want to fix and want to solve unsolvable problems. And I was caught in that trap a lot, especially when I was working in the high school, because these problems were not fixable. And really it was just about how can I be here and attuned to this person. And I think a lot of times, when you're working in a secondary setting and you have all these different stakeholders, I think that part got missed sometimes. And so just really narrowing that focus to that is all it is. It's you and the other person, and can you see them on their terms?
Yeah, that's huge, and it sounds very simple and simplistic in a sense. And when I got to graduate school, I like I said, I didn't get it. I kind of knew that was a component and important, but for me, I thought that I needed, and what was most important was to get all this information in, because that would enable me to fix things. And I realized how crazy it is. And as I'm admitting this again for the umpteenth time, it was, I think a lot of people get into this field because they want to help. And oftentimes that translates into fixing. But what you're talking about here really is profound. Just that beingness, and being able to do that and to attune to some, that's incredible stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if we can imagine what it's like when people are attuning to us, I always think about like when somebody asks you about something you're really excited about and they genuinely want to hear about it. What's that? I mean, that's a great feeling.
Yeah. It's a crazy feeling. You're like, oh my God, someone's actually caring and listening to me. Yeah. It's so true. And it also brings up the idea of authenticity and with both parties involved, it's crazy. Well, let me just reintroduce you here. I'm speaking with Kerry Heckman, and let's talk about a go-to book recommendation. What do you have?
Right. So I did bring Dr. Sharon Stanley's book with me today to talk about. It's called Relational and Body-Centered Practices for Healing Trauma, Lifting the Burdens of the Past. And, it's reasonable. It's a reasonable length. And I think something that I've struggled with, and and this is a book for clinicians, but something that I've struggled with in the trauma literature for both myself and for clients is I think that a lot of it is re-traumatizing. A lot of it is detailed descriptions about trauma and how those things are, healed, which is so important for us as clinicians to read and understand. But it's sometimes hard of knowing where to direct clients because they want information on nervous system healing, but don't always know where to go for that, to where there won't be lengthy descriptions of different traumas. But for clinicians, and I think this is that book, right? There's information about that, but mostly this is a practice book about how to attune, how to resonate, how to use your innate skill to be with, and it's less technique, right? It's not about here are some things that we can do to elicit body sensation, or we can do to, it's really just about trusting yourself. And if you know these things, and then you can have your own embodiment, then you can really make a difference in a person's life. And I think that it's incredibly inspirational, and I would recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, well said. I read that book and it is awesome. It's one I recommend all the time to people. We'll have that listed here at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. Kerry, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I would love for people to get in touch with me. Probably the easiest way is to go to my website, which is kerryjheckman.com. And I'm sure you can put it in the show notes of how to spell my name. But there you can kind of find links to link up with me on social media or send me a message. I'm probably the most active on Twitter. Fits my attention span.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Love connecting with other clinicians.
Awesome. Well, it was awesome meeting you and having you on here. Again, what you do and what you're talking about here is what I hope that this podcast is about, because I think it's so inspiring. So thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
Of course. Anytime.
All right. Take care.
You too.